Hi, my name's Margie Dangerfield. I'm a registered nurse, midwife, and independent Zinzino partner, and I've helped almost 3,000 people using Zinzino's test-based nutrition. In this video, I'm bringing you an industry leader and an expert in their field who are integrating Zinzino's personalised test-based nutritional approach into their clinical practice. So, if you're ready to move beyond guesswork and elevate your health and your patient outcomes with precision-driven strategies, you're in the right place. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, and welcome back. I'm interviewing an incredible woman. Her name is Dr. Cecilia Kitic. Welcome, Cecilia, to the Wednesday webinar.
Thanks for having me.
So tonight, if you're looking at trying to conceive, or you've been in IVF treatment, or you know someone who has been wanting to have a baby, this is actually the episode for you. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Cecilia, but I'd also then want everyone to know that there's an opportunity at the end of our webinar we'll go into a question and answer time. So if you have a question, please stay on to the end of the session, and Cecilia will open up the room. We'll turn the recording off and we will answer your questions. So Dr. Cecilia Kitic is the director of the IVF Project, which is a clinic that provides multidisciplinary allied health services, and that includes exercise physiologists, dieticians, and psychologists. And they all work collaboratively to enhance and support reproductive health, fertility, and well-being. Cecilia has a PhD in exercise immunology and has published over 80 papers researching immunonutrition, endocrinology, gut health, and inflammation. So Cecilia has a strong background as an academic, lecturing and researching, but applies this in her clinical practice with the team at the IVF Project. And all this work that it's being done behind the scenes is there to enhance your fertility journey and your reproductive treatment outcomes. So Cecilia is also the director of the Fertile Gut, which delivers scientifically formulated compounds to optimize the gut microbiome for better reproductive health. So in combination with her clinical practice, Dr. Kitic has presented at numerous national and international conferences and is the co-author of Create a Fertile Gut. Now, if you don't have this book, you need to purchase it, because it is a book that explores the strategies to optimize our gut microbiome for your fertility. So I'm delighted to have you here tonight, Cecilia. And we've been collaborating for some time now, but we met back at a conference, and I was just so impressed with the work that you were doing and you continue to do in the world of the IVF space. So thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to sharing some information that might just be a catalyst to help someone out there that's looking to conceive and have a healthy pregnancy. So hopefully you can see my screen up there. Is that working?
Yeah, that looks great. Yes.
Okay. So today we are going to obviously provide some practical strategies for increasing fertility and pregnancy success. But rest assured that what we do is pretty unique at the IVF Project, because we are implementing evidence-based scientific strategies that make a difference. So as a researcher, that's incredibly important to me. And I think it's incredibly important for our clients that we can let them know what evidence exists in supporting their fertility journeys. And also uniquely, each member of our team of allied health professionals has been through their own fertility journey and accessed assisted reproductive treatments. So we have a great understanding of the other emotional side as well in trying to conceive. But when we're talking about conception, a lot of it, and most of our other health and well-being, actually has a strong foundation for starting in the gut. So I want to take you through the inner workings of our gastrointestinal system, and particularly we're going to zoom in here to the large intestine, and this is where there is a hive of activity going on. So if we zoom in and we're looking at the intestine, it is only one layer of cells thick, which is quite remarkable, really, when you're thinking about what separates our inside, and this is where our immune tissue and our blood supply and aspects of our nervous system are located. And then this part of the gut is where food and fluid are transiting through. So when we look at our gut, we can actually see how fragile this single layer of cells is. Now, it's typically held together by tight proteins, tight junction proteins, but these proteins, they're not fixed in cement. They can be quite unstable at times, and they can actually then go back into the cells and cause the intestinal cells to become a little bit more permeable, or you might have heard the word leaky gut. Now, leaky gut isn't a medical diagnosis, but it really does describe what happens to that intestinal barrier when there's a bit of disruption going on. So when we take a look at what happens with that intestinal barrier, it's really important. These cells actually help us with the production of a number of compounds that help us digest foods. They actually can, they're an important layer of that protective barrier. And they can also secrete compounds then that form the next layer that we see in our gut, which is a nice thick mucus layer. If everything in the gut is working well, that mucus is a bit of a protective barrier, and it almost separates some of those components of food and fluid from those fragile intestinal cell layer. Now, that mucus is actually really quite, if there's a disease state or a lot of inflammation going on, that mucus layer tends to get eroded away, and that's clearly seen particularly in pathologies where there's irritable bowel disease, for example, like Crohn's disease. Now, the most exciting part when we're talking about the large intestine is right here on top of this mucus layer, and this is our microbiome. So these are the trillions of microorganisms that reside primarily in your gastrointestinal tract. And you've probably heard the word microbiome a million times lately. It's very hot and current in the media. But essentially, 2 kilograms of your body weight are microbes, these small, tiny organisms, and they play an incredibly important role in supporting our health and well-being, and of course, our fertility. So if we have a look at what these particular organisms living in our gut do, they can actually produce incredibly beneficial compounds for us. Oh, let me just go back up there. Let me move myself out of the way there. So they play a really important role in training and activating our immune cells. So this means that they're incredibly important in influencing our immune system. When there are disruptions in our gut microbiome, it's not uncommon that this could potentially even manifest as like frequent colds and illnesses, autoimmune conditions, and other inflammatory processes within the body. Now, if we have many beneficial microbes living in there, they can also help to tame and dampen inflammation and really support a healthy immune system with great surveillance for some of those pathogenic organisms that we want to keep out. Our microbes in there are incredibly important at even helping us extract nutrients from food, but also in making particular vitamins and minerals. There's a strong association between that gut microbiome community, how we absorb vitamin D, and it's not uncommon that in many autoimmune conditions, people will present with low vitamin D. And we're also getting some recent data supporting how important that community can be for maintaining iron balance, which again is incredibly important for fertility and going into early pregnancy. There's some preclinical work done where if you pull out the microbiome you actually then impair egg development in the ovary, because that ovary is missing out on key factors and enzymes that help support its growth and development because of what has happened in the gut. So they are all tightly connected, because our microbes can send out messenger signals that talk to our intestinal lining, and often we can even have fragments from our gut microbiome that, if our intestinal layer is not held together really nice and tightly, we can have some of those compounds that might be a bit damaging traveling into systemic circulation and into our bloodstream, and that then has an impact on our other organs. So what happens in the gut does not stay in the gut. It actually influences every other organ in the body. Our gut community is really important for helping us buffer toxins, and this even includes exposure to things like BPA, which can be hormone disrupting chemicals that we know particularly influence our fertility. Lots of work supports that if you have a nice resilient gut microbiome and lots of beneficial species living in that gut microbiome, it will dampen the impacts of those particular toxins. So our microbes also help us regulate estrogen in particular in females and testosterone in males. They can also make really beneficial compounds that influence our vascular health. So like our cardiovascular health, they influence the health of our liver, they influence our metabolism, and even influence our mood. Now, at the bottom there, just as one example, there's a particular compound that our microbes can help make if we eat a lot of animal-based products and have a lot of choline and L-carnitine in our diet. Now, this can end up increasing levels of trimethylamine N oxide, or TMAO, which is in that bottom corner there. Now, levels of that particular compound, if they are elevated in our follicular fluid in our ovaries, they actually impact then egg quality and IVF outcome. So again, there's a direct connection between what we're eating and how we're fueling our gut and what's going on in our sex organs, either our testes or our ovaries. Now, if we take a little look here, this is just another supportive study that illustrates that transition of compounds from the gut, that potentially if our gut microbiome isn't incredibly happy, if we've got a lot of pathogenic species in there, or we're missing some of the really beneficial species, what can happen is we have an increase in disruption in that intestinal cell layer, and we can have fragments of particular bacteria coming into our bloodstream. Now, these fragments, we already know they're associated with impacting egg quality, sperm quality, uterine receptivity, early pregnancy development, and pregnancy progression. And this particular study that was only published just a couple of months ago, it actually looked at levels of flagellin in the bloodstream. Now, flagellin is essentially a protein that comes from the flagellum, or the little tail of bacteria, certain bacteria. So you might have seen bacteria sort of moving around with a corkscrew tail, pushing it along. When there are particular components in that tail and there's disruption to the gut barrier, that flagellin can come into the bloodstream. Now, in women that had IVF success and got pregnant, they found that those serum levels of that bacterial byproduct were actually about half of what was found in other women who didn't achieve pregnancy. So again, a direct relationship there. If we take a look at protective antioxidants, so if we can help out our immune system, if we can actually make sure that we're reducing inflammation, what we can see is an increase in pregnancy rate. So over here on the right, what we're looking at is levels of peroxyredoxin 4. You can think of this as an antioxidant compound. It is going to help mop up products of oxidative stress and inflammation. Now, when they looked at the levels of this particular antioxidant in follicular fluid, which is the fluid that our eggs are bathing in as they mature in our ovary, what they showed was that it was much more likely for these women to achieve a clinical pregnancy if they had higher levels of these compounds that are anti-inflammatory. So again, a direct relationship there between inflammation, our immune system, and achieving pregnancy. It's not just females either. And this is such an important component that we reiterate. It really is 50-50. Even if a particular female factor has been identified, it is even more important that there's a focus on optimizing sperm health, because our eggs ultimately repair sperm. And if we can get sperm to come along with as little damage as possible, it's going to increase that likelihood of making healthy embryos or achieving pregnancy. Now, this graphic is pretty busy. There's a lot going on. Essentially, what I want you to look at first of all is on the left, you're going to see a set of scales. Now, this scale here is showing us that there's balance between inflammation and then all of the other protective mechanisms we have in place to actually buffer that inflammation. So you can see here, there's a nice balance there between those pro-inflammatory compounds and then all our anti-inflammatory compounds. What we're seeing here in this quarter, it's actually the cross-section of a tube that is our seminiferous tubule, and that is where sperm is made. So these particular pink blobs here, these are actually Sertoli cells that provide nourishment as the sperm is being made. So these sperm rely heavily on healthy cells, and part of healthy cells involves healthy functioning membranes and less inflammation. So in this picture where there's balance, we're producing testosterone, and again, these cells here helping manufacture the sperm and nourish them are working well, and we end up producing nice healthy sperm. In another equation where we have more pro-inflammatory stimulus, okay, and less of the beneficial protective elements, what we see is cellular damage. And this damage can happen by even changing the particular composition of the cell membranes. And what we see here then is this sperm is not as healthy and happy as this sperm above. So this sperm is going to be impacted by that inflammation. And indeed, when we look at sperm health and gut microbiome disruption, there's a strong correlation there where if the microbiome's happy and helping support inflammation, then we're producing better quality sperm. Now, something that we see in clinic quite common is when a male might have a semen analysis done and some of the parameters aren't in the normal range, or there's a high level of DNA damage in that sperm. So that's a particular marker that can be measured called DNA fragmentation. Now, essentially in the body, we're all going to have some level of a little bit of DNA damage, some single strand breaks, but when that level of damage is quite high, it has an impact on getting pregnant naturally. Sometimes people will be told your sperm maybe isn't great. We need to go through a process called ICSI, which is where we're going to select the sperm in a petri dish, and we're going to actually do fertilize your eggs in the laboratory and see what happens. So a lot of people think if we've got bad sperm, we just go and do ICSI, and that's what our specialist said to overcome this issue. Now, doing that doesn't overcome it entirely. And indeed, if we look here on the right, this is looking at, on the right here, this is looking at DNA fragmentation. And here we're looking at the birth weight of the child. So even when fragmentation rates are high, so here fragmentation sort of getting over 15%, we can start to see that there's a downward trend in birth weight for the child. Now, birth weight is a great global marker for health and well-being and looking at early development for that child. So that sperm epigenetically is imprinting on your future child's health. So this is incredibly important to address. And even we're going to talk about just one simple strategy tonight that can be supportive. But I want to show you, not to overwhelm with this exhaustive list, but when you have disruption in the gut microbiome, so whether that is through depleting beneficial species, maybe you haven't been eating a lot of fiber or whole grain carbohydrate in your diet, and you've noticed that the type of foods that you can eat and digest starts to get more restricted and more restricted and more restricted, because you're maybe stripping out some of those beneficial fibers that are actually feeding your good microbes. And if we don't have enough good microbes in there, some of the pathogenic microbes then start to grow in abundance. So when we see a bit of disruption in the microbiome, that is associated with these conditions here, particularly including polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, in male factor infertility, even things like having the presence of a varicocele in the testes is associated with microbiome disruption. And that, again, is because of that strong relationship between inflammation and what's happening to the health of our cells. Gut disruptions present, even if you have an irregular menstrual cycle, you might be suffering amenorrhea or other aspects, particularly around autoimmune disease or bowel disease, even IBS. This means that if you have gut microbiome disruption, or if you have one of the conditions on the left, you will have gut microbiome disruption. This is going to impact the success of fertility treatments, and particularly things like IVF and ICSI and natural conception. There's even work showing that how responsive you are to medications through the IVF process is related to your gut microbiome composition. So this is something that you want to work on in that preconception phase, or even if you have been undergoing rounds of treatment, it's providing an opportunity maybe to think about what aspects of your gut microbiome you need to address. If we talk about a simple strategy, there's a great relationship and a great body of work showing that the higher your diet is in the diversity of plant-based foods, that is going to have the best association with a diverse microbiome that has lots of organisms in there to support you and do lots of the jobs that your body requires and help you digest lots of different foods, produce lots of vitamins and minerals, and help train your immune system so that it's not overreactive. This doesn't matter if you are a vegan or you eat a little bit of meat. Again, it's not necessarily that single diet. It's about how many plant-based foods you are eating across the week. A goal that we sometimes give to clients is have 30 different plant-based foods a week. Now, that may sound quite a lot and unachievable, but by the time you actually think about having a stir fry, you can have 5 or 6 different veggies, then you might have a salad with, again, another 6 or 7 different veggies. This all starts to feed those microbes. Because if you have a diet that has what's considered a high inflammatory index, so if your diet contains a lot of saturated fats and animal products, if your diet contains a lot of processed foods, if your diet contains a lot of added sugar, there is a 76% increased risk of infertility. So how you nourish your body matters. Now, I want to show you this slide showing the power of food-based compounds and extracts that we know have the evidence behind them to support our gut microbiome. What we're looking at up the top here is a cross-section of that intestinal layer I showed you in the nice graphic image to start with. This is here looking at a slide of the actual cells. So all these little blue bits are beautiful mucus-producing components that keep that intestinal layer nice and healthy, and you can see the cells sitting nice and close together. Now, this here is a damaged intestine. So we can start to see that those cells are breaking open. There are, some disruption there between that intestinal barrier, and it doesn't look as nice and healthy. add particular compounds back into that damaged gut, you can repair and restore it. So this is showing that incorporation of prebiotic fibers that actually then can change that intestinal barrier, restore the microbiome, and start to reduce inflammation. One other thing that is prebiotic, and prebiotic just means that we're feeding the good bacteria in the gut and we're making them grow in abundance. So essentially we're fertilizing the gut. A key prebiotic are omega-3 fatty acids. These are very important. So it's not just carbohydrate that can be prebiotic, it's certain essential fatty acids like omega-3s. So these omega-3s tend to promote the growth of beneficial species. They tend to help with the production of compounds that reinforce that intestinal layer. And they also can get absorbed systemically and have other benefits. So when we look at the data around omega-3s and fertility, they make a significant difference to the opportunity for conception. They improve pregnancy rates. They improve fertilization rates through fertility treatments like IVF. They improve embryo quality. And again, they're improving semen quality. And part of this is because of how omega-3s change the actual cell structure. So if we have a little look here at this picture, what we can actually see, it looks like little heads on one end and tails on one end. It's not a lot of sperm packed together, although it does sort of look a little bit like that. What we're looking at is the lipid bilayer in each cell membrane. So essentially our cell membranes are made up of fats, and part of those fats include omega-3 fats and also omega-6s. Now, these are both essential fatty acids, but what we see is that omega-6s actually tend to be a bit more pro-inflammatory. And when omega-6s break down, they lead to the production of compounds that can cause a lot of disruption and cell damage. There's a lot of data supporting that in women that experience menstrual pain, in infertility, in their reproductive tracts, there are high levels of omega-6 compared to omega-3s. So what we're really interested in looking at is actually, well, what is the composition of your cell membrane? Do you have a lot of omega-3 in there? And how is that balanced against the omega-6s, which can be more pro-inflammatory? If we've got a nice balance there and that ratio is healthy, that's great, because it means that our cell membrane can work well, because that cell membrane is an important regulator of what's going on in the cell. And there are key proteins in that cell membrane. And so those fats are all communicating and, importantly, maintaining the fluidity of that cell membrane, which is going to help the cell work properly and get important chemicals from our systemic circulation into the cell. When we look at the ratio of those more pro-inflammatory omega-6s to our anti-inflammatory omega-3s, what we want to see is a ratio that is ideally sort of under 4:1. So looking at that 3:1 ratio. But what actually we see in clinic very often, and in the general population as well, most of our Western diets are actually associated with a ratio 20:1 or higher. So most people do not have an ideal ratio to support that aspect of cellular health, to help reduce inflammation and support fertility. If we actually take a look again at some of the data, we see that there's an imbalance in this ratio in men that are considered infertile. There is in women that have a nice ratio that is sort of 3:1 or lower in that healthy range. We see that it benefits fertility, and it also benefits pregnancy. Even there's recent research showing how beneficial it is for the breastfed infant in improving their mental and psychomotor development. It is quite extraordinary. When we're talking about omega-3s, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I eat fish, I have salmon in my diet. It depends on where you are in the world, but we know there's quite a distinct difference between wild-caught salmon and fresh-caught salmon in nutrient value, in vitamin and mineral content, but also in those omega-3s. Yes, you're getting omega-3, but you're also getting quite a large serve of omega-6 if that fish is farmed. So in Australia, it's very difficult to get wild-caught fish, and so most of our fish in the supermarkets is farmed. And again, that tends to have a different nutritional profile. We want to reduce the omega-6 intake and get more omega-3s. Here, what we're looking at in this colourful graph is we're actually looking at different types of sort of omega-3 sources along the bottom. And on the side there, we're looking at the stability index. Now, with fats, they tend to be prone to oxidation. So if you actually have a fat and it doesn't have something around it protecting it, it might oxidize pretty quickly. And we can see here in the red bar that, let's say here we've got krill oil, and we can start to see that it becomes unstable pretty quickly. So that means that by the time you've ingested it, it's actually probably causing a little bit more disruption in the gut because it's oxidizing. If we come all the way over here and we look at omega-3s that are packaged with protective polyphenols, and these are essentially powerful antioxidant compounds coming from virgin olive oil, we can see that stability index is 35 hours. So this means you can ingest that omega-3 with a protective polyphenol. You can then have it work its magic in the gut microbiome. You can have it then absorbed, taken up into circulation, and there's enough time for it to get incorporated into cell membranes and start to offer more protection. So in Australia, Zinzino, and this is globally as well, Zinzino are the manufacturers of that combination of high quality omega-3s that are packaged with protective polyphenols. So when you look at data comparing, okay, let's say that someone hasn't been taking an omega at all. In data, and this is coming from a huge number of tests, what we see is that the average ratio across the globe is 14.8 to 1. Remember, the ideal ratio is 3 to 1. This is quite a way off. When we take a look at people that have been using an omega-3, so trying to support their fertility or their general health, we can see that in people taking just an omega-3, that ratio is still far from ideal at 9.9 to 1. In people that then use balance oil, okay, so this is this cohort at 9.9 to 1. After a period of time of taking balance oil with a protective polyphenol, that ratio has a dramatic shift. Again, we have the scientific data showing why this is so much more effective and how that then can make a massive difference to the structure of your cell membranes, to changing that composition and changing the function for the better.
And Cecilia, that was me. And I mean, for those of you who are listening tonight and you are taking an alternate brand of omega-3, I mean, that was my story. I got tested and my ratio came back at 8.5 to 1. So yeah, if you are listening, I would strongly recommend you get tested, because you may not be aware that your product is actually oxidizing and not giving you the benefits that Cecilia is talking about tonight.
Yeah. And again, when they're bottled at the source, that's providing the most protection to those fats. So if we take a look at the testing, it is an at-home finger prick dried spot blood test. So it's something you can do at your own home, pop it into the post. The test will actually end up at an independent laboratory in Norway. So it is analysed without any identifying data. So again, you can rest assured in their GMP certified facility that the testing is being performed appropriately and you're getting accurate data, which is always great for peace of mind as well. And we have all done our own tests in the clinic, and it's been quite interesting with clients too. It's not uncommon that we might see people that are, say, 24 to 1. And it's also a great opportunity to provide you information in supporting that preparedness for treatment. So, like, how ready am I if I have to undergo fertility treatment, or I'm getting ready to conceive and I want to make sure I've optimized all of the components, that I've got power to do, because IVF doesn't improve egg and sperm quality. That's where you come in, and you have the power to make such a difference. So, if we're talking about supporting our fertility, our gut microbiome is a foundation, because that's going to impact fertility and inflammation. We know that the more we can support that diversity, that's a really beneficial thing. And prebiotics, omega-3s, eating an anti-inflammatory diet, these all support the health of that microbiome and reduce inflammation. So we think determining your ratio is an important component there, because it might even lead to further exploration, particularly if you're someone who's unsure of why you're not conceiving yet, why you're not getting pregnant. Taking that test can be a nice reflection of that global inflammatory status that then might lead to even further steps to address it. So that's the important thing. If you test, then there's a way to address it and actually take it down to a level that we know is associated with improved outcomes. So adopting anti-inflammatory eating patterns are super important, not just for fertility, but through pregnancy and for passing on to your children as well. So if you are going to supplement, you want to do it strategically. I cannot stress this enough. We often see people in clinic that come in with a list of 20 things they're taking. Some of them don't even have an evidence base, or might actually be doing harm rather than good, because not all compounds out there marketed for people in the fertility space actually do what they say they're going to do. And it all depends on your clinical circumstance. But foundationally, we absolutely suggest that everyone takes a quality omega-3 paired with polyphenol to support their fertility. So do supplement strategically. Know that there's evidence base for what you're taking. So at the moment, when we're talking about these anti-inflammatory eating patterns, and we recognize too that not everyone has access to these tools, and not everyone can even access assisted reproductive treatments if they need it and they're on the journey to parenthood. So we have actually created this resource, and this is based off all of our science in the book that you were talking about, Margie, at the start, Create a Fertile Gut. This is where we will actually hold your hand and take you through the course content and modules and workbook that are going to give you the strategies to support your microbiome and your fertility. So this has never been more accessible. As we say, IVF is expensive, but this isn't. And this actually is what's changing egg and sperm quality and uterine receptivity. So this is available now at that discounted value of $47.
Yeah, that's incredible, Cecilia. And having worked in the IVF space myself, as an IVF nurse for 14 years, there was one question that we were always asked, and that was, what else can we do? Because, whether it's the first IVF treatment or couples that have experienced infertility for years, when we start talking about strategies like this, they have always said, why didn't I know about this? Why didn't I know about this when I started? Because this is a very, it's incredible information. It's a hugely evidence-based program that Cecilia is working on with a multidisciplinary team. And yes, she's here in Australia, but this program that she has available is open to anyone in the world because it's an online program. So that's why we're getting it out there to you. So whether it's for yourself and you're listening and you're wanting to have a baby and perhaps going through IVF treatment, or someone who is trying to conceive, this would be an incredible gift. Or please pass on the information and direct them to the ivfproject.com, because the information that you've provided tonight, Cecilia, is heavily, heavily evidence-based, and that's what we're all about. Because we don't like people to see, wasting their money. Stop guessing, get tested, and make sure you are following strategies that we actually know work. So yeah, that's a brilliant offer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a really, it's a difficult time, and it's
Mm.
so common for people to feel lost and overwhelmed with all the information out there. And how do you sort through the noise and know what's evidence-based and, what's a resource formulated by accredited practitioners with experience in this space and their own journeys. So we, yes, would love everyone to access it, which is why we've made it so accessible, because we know what a difference it can make to people's journeys.
So, yeah, absolutely. That QR code. If I was you listening tonight, please get your phone out and jump on that access code so you can share that with other people as well. But thank you so much, Cecilia. I just love listening to you. I'm always learning from you every time I hear you speak, and the fact that you are willing to share all of your strategies and all the science and all the work that you're doing is just incredible. So, for those of you who want to learn more, please, you can get in touch with Dr. Cecilia Kitic through her clinic, but accessing that offer for $47 is incredible.